everything you could do on the wrist, you're going to do more accurately at the ear so that you get the highest precision. We literally have ear technology in our company today that outperforms a chest strap.
Welcome and hello to another Coffee with Mr. IoT. My name is Robert Schmidt. I'm Deloitte's Chief IoT Technologist, also known as Mr. IoT. And today my guest is Dr. Stephen LeBoeuf, the President and Co-Founder for Valencell. Welcome to the show. How are you doing? And did I get the name right this time around?
You got it right. Just think LeBoeuf. Like I said, I've had enough of LeBoeuf and I'm doing all right. It is great to be on your show.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. Dr. LeBoeuf, tell us a little bit about your company. You are co-founder. I love meeting with people that come up with awesome ideas, and your idea is beyond awesome. I've always been wondering, why isn't there more sensors around our health and so forth? And you have some amazing stuff around this. Tell a bit about it, what's special, and I'd like to hear about you, how you came up with this.
All right. Yeah. Well, Valencell is a really interesting company in this wearable space because, we don't make our own consumer wearable products. We make technology and sensor modules that have all the hardware and software in them to do all the calculations and analysis. We provide that to the marketplace so that folks can make their favorite smartwatches or fitness bands or audio earbuds or apparel or whatever they want with that capability to accurately measure biometrics. And we started the company with this big vision that we would essentially live in a world where, with devices and things that people wear every day anyway, we could take information from those devices and then target therapies uniquely to them that will improve their outcomes uniquely based off of that information. And that was the big vision when we started. But of course, to get there, as you mentioned, and you rightly mentioned, you've always wondered why we don't have more sensors around us today. And in part, that's because we still haven't finished our job. There's still a long way to go to take advantage of that technology, to use it for these grand plans. Now, for us, what helped out was, in the short term, there was an unmet need to accurately measure heart rate as you exercise in devices people like wearing, because nobody in the
Are you in my watch here? Is this you blinking?
It may be. Some companies license our technology, some companies use our sensor modules, and some companies license our patents. And we're not always at liberty to discuss which companies do which.
Got it.
But but that product, it looks like it's not one of our sensor modules, so they may be a licensee in a different way, or they may not be. But the technology, the core technology we developed, really is designed to work on almost any part of the body. It's based off of measuring two big things. One of them is light that's shined into the body and how it comes out. The other is inertial changes, so motion in the body. And combining those two bits of information is how we generate all these biometrics. In what the first use case that really got us to fame is creating a technology that replaced the need for a chest strap during exercise. But as time has gone on, that same core technology, since our technology is so accurate, we're able to apply that towards all different types of medical use cases. And that's why you see a lot more today in the news about Valencell in these medical wearable use cases, as opposed to traditional consumer wearable use cases.
So I have my watch here. It has like this light sensor on it. I think this is the piece that you talk about, right? It sends light into my hand, and then it measures what's going on there. What's the difference today between this and something medical? Is the accuracy that much different? How do we, give me some perspective? Because I always thought, for me, it was about improving relative to how I was yesterday to today and next week. But you talk about accuracy, medical versus consumer grade. Give me a little bit of an idea of the differences, and does it actually matter?
It does matter. And it matters because it really, really depends on the use case. So for example, it is true that in some consumer devices, they don't care about the accuracy so much because it's kind of just a checkbox. I've got a heart rate monitor in there. But if you really need to train in heart rate zones, that's important for your fitness profile, or for example, it's extremely important for anything you're doing in sports training. But if you're training to your heart rate, you really need an accurate heart rate monitor. But just because you're an accurate heart rate monitor for exercise or fitness doesn't mean you're measuring the things that are critical for a medical use case. For example, if I'm trying to understand if you're in the right heart rate zone during exercise, that use case is really just letting you know if you really are exerting yourself as you need to be in the right heart rate zones to get the right kind of metabolic response from your body. But that's not going to tell you if you have atrial fib. It's not going to tell you if you have hypertension. It's not going to tell you if you have some cardiac concern that needs to be addressed. And in order to do that, you need higher resolution in more processing in that data. And also you need your optics design right to get the light where it needs to go.
Are you wearing one on a regular basis personally?
No, well, it's not true. I wear one on a regular basis for exercise. The one I use is in my bag right here. I have a Jabra Elite Sport and also an Amazfit Power Buds. I also have a Bose Sound Sport Pulse, which has our technologies in it. I like to use the earpieces. So I use them for when I exercise. I'm not a wrist guy. I don't like to wear the wrist products myself personally. A lot of our partners do. I'm an ear guy. I like to go to the gym, pop the earbuds in, and go. And there's two reasons I like the earpiece. The first one is everything you could do on the wrist, you're going to do more accurately at the ear so that you get the highest precision. We literally have ear technology in our company today that outperforms a chest strap in many different use cases. So it's incredibly, incredibly precise. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that I just love the use case of not having to have anything on here. I've already got my earbuds in the gym. I see you got some on right there. I pop my earbuds in, I go, and I've got my monitoring going on, and I don't have any of this crap here. But some people totally dig it. Some people totally dig having stuff on the wrist. And so we provide technology in the ear. We provide it on the wrist. We provide it on armbands, apparel, eyewear. Some of our customers, for example, have it integrated into therapeutics that are worn at the eye. So a variety of different. We don't discriminate against any body part. You could only imagine the body locations that we might be in right now.
So I'm fascinated by this. I had no idea that measuring in the ear is more accurate than on your wrist. Why is that? What's the difference? And beside the fact that it's more comfortable to you, which I totally get that idea, but what's different physiology-wise?
Boy, I am glad you asked that, Robert, because that's I almost would have never thought to even answer that. I think to say that importance. So it turns out there's a bunch of reasons why the ear is overall better. One is the biggest weakness of any wearable device for accurately measuring biometrics is its ability to handle motion artifacts. And so, for example, if you're shining light in the body and you go outside, well, there's a big jolt of light that comes in from the sun. And how do you determine that change in light from this tiny little bit of light that's coming to your skin? Well, every time you move your skin on your wrist, it changes the light path. How do you know that's a wrist motion versus a blood flow motion? And it's hard to do. And a lot of our technology processes all this data to generate just the blood flow information. But on the ear, there's much less motion artifacts. You see people doing pull-ups all the time with their arms, but I still have not seen anyone do a pull-up with their ear. And so the motion artifacts are much, 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 much less. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you could measure more at the ear and more accurately than you can at other body locations. So for example, at the ear, you can assess core body temperature. You can't really do that on the wrist today. Also on the ear, you have access to these arterioles, which are connected right to the arteries, and you get these nice pulsatile waveforms, which help you very accurately assess blood pressure and other biometrics that are pressure oriented from the ear. Also, if you want to get an assessment of your true arterial oxygenation, you know how, for example, in the Apple Watch, there's some new technology that allows you to have an assessment of your blood oxygenation level. The reality is that technology doesn't truly measure your arterial oxygenation. It measures some localized oxygenation on your wrist, which is fine, but it's not your true arterial oxygenation. But you can really assess that on the ear. And so there's all these different interesting aspects of the ear that make it fascinating. Also, another thing is body sounds. The ear naturally is designed to transmit sounds, to your body. And it turns out there's a lot of information that can be generated from a sculptatory sound-based body sounds that come from your body, from the ear. So you combine that all together, and it's a really wonderful place.
So better with sound, closer to arterial flow, and therefore being able to measure blood pressure, which that on its own to me is fascinating, that you've gone from heart rate to blood pressure without having a cough, and then less movement. I'm gonna have to go a little Star Trekky on you. Is that okay? So my first question is, if it's about movement and being close to arteries, how far away are we from having them implanted?
Well, so I would guess. So the technologies already exist for this. So there are some really awesome implantable technologies that can measure a lot of physiological phenomena. People aren't willing to get them in. It's extremely expensive. And also people don't want to have that in their bodies. And there's all kinds of reasons why it's not the first place you want to go. But I would say maybe within 25 to 30 years, maybe
that
even
far.
less. Yeah, maybe even less. I could see people getting implanted devices for the purpose of personal health improvement and personal health monitoring, not just because they have to. And I think it's far out. I think it really is far out. But at the same time, it's the technology's there. The cost has to go down, and then also the population has to accept it. But the cost is interesting because there's two parts of the cost. One is the cost to get the technology in you, but then there's the value proposition. It's what's the value proposition of that cost. So if I'm planting this device in my body, what is it going to do to not just improve public health or improve my health, but also do so by reducing cost overall? Because everything in medical today, everything we've ever touched in medical, and every bit of interest we've ever gotten from the marketplace in medical has to have two things in it. It has to improve public health somehow, improve health in some way at a reduced cost. If it's just improving health, forget about it. I mean, it has, because you need a way to also reduce costs, because the big thing that the world is dealing with right now is healthcare just costs too damn much.
I was gonna ask you about that actually, because my take on this is I get it. People are hesitant to implant stuff in themselves unless they have to. The moment you have to put a titanium piece in your bone so you can walk, people do. And so this got me to this question of, when does it become preventative? When does it become maintaining health rather than fixing a problem, right? Because I think this is sort of where the big use case is, really helping me be more healthy in ways by telling me things before they actually become a problem. Talk to me about this a little bit more, and where are we going with this? Where are you going with this? And I guess I'm interested both from your company's point of view and also your point of view as how do you deal with it?
So I think your question is related to on the prevention side, what can be done to
Keeping people
prevent.
healthy rather than healing people.
That's right. So yeah, those great questions, and the technology can help with both, but certainly where it provides the most palpable value is in prevention. And give you a good example. And there've been so many studies on this, and only recently has it been shown that it's really true that what causes cardiovascular disease is a combination of a few factors. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. It's one is high blood pressure, and the high blood pressure it damages your blood vessels when it happens over time. It weakens them, and what's known as in those weak spots, that's where cholesterol accumulates. So if you have high blood pressure and you have high cholesterol, you really are setting yourself up for some bad outcomes. And so one of the ways to address that is to be aware that you have high blood pressure, and then to make changes to your lifestyle, ideally, or in some cases, if that doesn't work, to take medication to prevent that from happening. And then you can have outcomes. The American Heart Association has shown you can have mortality rates that are just like people who don't have hypertension or never had the condition if you're able to manage it. The problem is few people know they have it. It's the silent killer. People think they're fine and they're not. They might go to the doctor and get one measurement that shows that blood pressure is very high or very low. And the reality is throughout the day, it's the opposite. And so simply allowing people to assess that and make lifestyle changes with the right kind of feedback to reduce that can have lifelong effects of not just helping people live longer and healthier, but longer, more productive lives. Another example here on the prevention side is just in early on, a lot of the wearables marketplace focused on this because it's so important. Simply keeping control of your resting heart rate has a tremendous mortality benefit. So your resting heart rate is defined as that heart rate you have when you've woken up quietly in bed, and being awake before you've moved around. And it's really hard to get because who's going to take their resting heart rate at that time? With some of these wearable tracking devices, you can do that. You can either measure the resting heart rate or estimate what it was based off the heart rate before and after, and really plot that out and help see if there's any conditions that could be forming that you just otherwise wouldn't have even thought about. And when you factor that in with motion, you can start to learn how your body is responding to motion with cardiac efficiency. So for example, the fitter you are, the less heartbeats it takes to move a footstep. And you can sense that, you can see that. And that goes a long way.
It's so interesting, right? So I just looked at my resting heart rate on my device because I wasn't sure what it was.
Up. Did it just jack up?
I was going to talk about that. I was going to talk about this, that you see this peak at the end here. That's my holiday lack of workout and eating too much. And it's interesting how it's interesting how it immediately went from very low 60s to middle 60s. I mean, I don't know what a good heart rate is or not, but even my comparison is interesting to me. So it's interesting to talk about this. But isn't that sort of like everything you said? Wouldn't that lend me to believe that wearing this not just for exercise or have it in my ears, but having constantly gives you health indicators about me, gives you information that's valuable to say, hey, Robert, I've noticed XYZ, in this case, resting heart rate has gone up by about 5%. What's going on? And then have a conversation and take action on?
Yeah, my favorite scenario in the technology, well, rather, the user experiences have not developed this far, even though I believe the technology has gotten to enable them today. What the user experience I would love is, okay, say, let's take Robert. Robert, we've seen something unusual, a bad trend. Oh, really? You want to find out more about it? You might click on it or ask it for more information. And it shows you exactly what it's seeing. And then you could look through and see what some of the origins might be. So you could see what changed. Maybe it's a dramatic change in resting heart rate. Maybe it's a dramatic change in your blood pressure throughout the day. And you could see those things, and it could then recommend what you could do about it. For example, we can send this to your physician. And one of the beautiful things now that's happened is because a lot of these value propositions have been shown, the prevention value proposition has been shown now, and insurers believe it. Now, there are CPC codes, reimbursement codes that allow doctors to be reimbursed for collecting this information. So now doctors have...
We're incenting the doctors to really interact with us on that side.
That's right.
On the health side, rather than the preventive side, rather than on the fixing side. Got it.
That's right. Because I really do believe doctors, you don't want to take doctors out of this, because I mean, that would be, I think, a bad move. But you can give them tools that allow them to tailor their recommendations to you better than simply a one-shot measurement at the doctor's office every once in a while, maybe once a year.
Yeah, it's about the incentives, right? If you give people incentives, me and the doctor, to work on it together, then it makes a difference. This is why I love some of the gamification on this so much. I'm curious, you must work obviously with your licensees and your customers in a global way. Are you seeing differences, how different regions, countries, cultures deal with this differently? What have you learned, and what are you bringing back to the US for that?
That is a question that no one has ever asked me before, period, is how do different cultures use this technology? And so what's interesting is that In the United States, one thing that's kind of weird is I find it unique to the United States is in the United States, everybody has a dream. It's a very aspirational nation. I mean, from the richest people in the nation to the poorest, everybody has a dream. That is not the case for every other nation. You have a lot of aspiring people in every nation, but it's not necessarily as just fundamentally cultural as it is in the United States. And so the way people will market to people in the United States is with these technologies is very aspirational, almost sports-like. Even if it's being used for a health purpose, there's this aspirational bent to it. In other nations, it's more about being in line with whatever institutions are in place in those nations. So, for example, if there's a certain health system that a certain nation might have, then it's more aligned with that particular health system or some either national or primary insurance that's in that nation and how they do things. It's more about integrating within those platforms. That's more about how the marketing is done. But I'd say those are probably the two biggest things. As far as form factor goes, I'd say that there is probably, generally speaking, equal distribution of form factor interest in the US and abroad, the same ratio of people, earbuds versus wristbands versus armbands. So I'm not aware of any difference there.
It's interesting. I mean, I come from Europe originally, right? And so I'm always curious how different cultures and so forth make a difference. So anyhow, thanks for the answer. I appreciate it. So I want to close with something you just said in your last answer, and I'm going to start with answering it for myself. I think if you'd ask me what my dream is, I always dream to have an impact on people's lives and so forth. And I find it really interesting too, right? If I feel I have no impact, I get really frustrated with what I do. And it's sort of like the having an impact helps me getting through hurdles and so forth. So I don't know, that might sound really simple or not really a big dream, but I think what happens is then that manifests itself in little dreams, like I want to do this, I want to do that. And please don't ever tell me you can't do that, because that's like the motivator to show people you can. So that's my little story on my dream. What's your dream? And yeah, what would you answer this if I'd ask you what's your dream? Since we all brought up to have a dream, I guess is your thing. And I actually agree with you. I love that, by the way. This is probably one of the reasons why I moved to this country 25 years ago.
Yeah, God help
I'm
us
curious
we
about
keep
yours.
creating a culture where we encourage the most aspirational to come here. If we keep that up, the United States is going to be shining for a while, like whatever it is shining behind me right now. But if we fail at that, we'll reap those consequences. Rob, would you mind if I told you, to answer your question, told you a real life story?
Absolutely, please. I'd
So,
love to hear about you.
when I realized, before I started Valencell, I worked as a scientist for General Electric, and I tell you, I love that job. I really love that job. I don't feel like I've had a job, really, a job, as people call it, since I started there at GE. There was 1 year in my life, since 2001, I had a job, and that was my last year at GE. That's why I left. And it came from an epiphany I had in 2004. I was at the Austin City Limits Festival in Austin, which is fantastic outdoor music festival, hot as all hell, but wonderful music festival. And I was out there with friends, and all these interesting artists were there, from the most popular to those you didn't hear too much about. And my friends really wanted to hear Sheryl Crow. Sheryl Crow was playing, of course, very well known, one of the most famous of all female musicians, or all musicians really in the world. And so I was like, all right, I'll go see Sheryl Crow since my friends want to see it. But I was really more interested in seeing some of the other shows, some of the names I didn't hear too much about. So, all right, I go there, and there's Sheryl Crow, and she puts on a great show. And as she's standing there, for some reason, I thought to myself, I said, self, would I be happy if I had achieved Sheryl Crowhood? Like, if I were Sheryl Crow, would I feel like I achieved something big? And I realized the answer was no. And it bothered me. Like, why? Why is it that it bothers me? I mean, here she is. She's in the top of a field of musicians. Here she's, playing at the Austin City Limits Festival. At the time, her boyfriend was arguably the world's greatest athlete, with Lance Armstrong. Now we know he was doping up back then, but hell, who the hell wasn't back then? And she had all these great things going for her. And the thing that got me was it was typical. I mean, her music is poppy. It wasn't breakthrough. Other people, the other pop music is out there. There was nothing that was groundbreaking, nothing that was making a big impact. And it dawned on me that, the thing for me wasn't about trying to make a bunch of money or get a bunch of fame, but it was to make something big happen. Where people would go and say, how the hell did this guy think of this thing? And how, if it weren't for this guy, this person doing this thing, how soon would this have ever come to be? And so it really was eye opening for me. That what really motivated me was making something big happen in a unique way that really would take people aback and say, "Whoa, where the hell did that idea come from?"
Well, it seems to me you are making something big happen. It seems big to me. I hope it seems big to you, because you seem. Are you happy with where you are with your big thing?
Well, what's funny is the short answer is I'm happy, but I feel like the big vision that we talked about earlier, it still hasn't happened. That user experience you outlined and I outlined, it still has to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. And that keeps me doing everything I can within the resources I have to move closer to that.
What can I do? What can people that watch do to come along on that journey and make it happen?
I think that if we can
Your call
agree
to
on
action for me and others.
if we can agree on that unified vision, then I think what we have to do is find ways to encourage entrepreneurs, or rather find ways to not make it so hard for entrepreneurs to make an impact. Because one of the big challenges I see today is the way the rules of the game are, it really favors the big five. And the big five, it's God bless them. I love them being big five. They can be as big five as they want, but they have certain ways of seeing the world that aren't the same as what needs to be seen. And when the rules of the game are written to where they benefit those folks rather than folks coming from the bottom up, and discourage and make it really extremely hard, in some cases almost nigh impossible from the bottom up, that's not good for innovation. So we need to figure that out, I feel.
I almost feel like it's all up to every single one of us to have a little vision, have a little dream, and follow that dream. So thank you so much for being on the show. I was super fascinated by what you do, and please keep dreaming big.
No
You
doubt.
make a big difference out there. Thank you. And I will never look at my watch, or maybe I should I will always look at the back of my watch very differently. And I'm going to think of Dr. Stephen LeBoeuf. So thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you much, Robert. Thanks for your time. Pleasure being on your show.
Awesome. And with that, we have another coffee with Mr. D coming to an end. If you missed any of today's or previous shows, please check out our playlist on YouTube or any of your favorite podcasts. And with that, I'm going to say have a good day, and yeah, check your watch.